So
Take it apart.
the one thing I did that I think is really cool, especially coming out of, because like you congratulate me for finishing the feature,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking that's a 20-month process for me, was from writing to crowdfunding to production to
Yeah.
me editing it myself to
And I got to see the whole process, which is
yeah.
really cool.
So that's 20 months.
I forgot about the crowdfunding.
So that was a whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, so for you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. About the book She Can
Yeah.
Fly.
She can fly.
So talk to us about first of all what the book is and what.
So She Can Fly is a book. It's a memoir of domestic violence and sexual assault. So it's very heavy. It is a cautionary tale that I wrote with the nanny who raised me. So it's her life story, authored by me. It's not my memoir. Um, and she pretty much had it as bad as you can have it. So our intention was to share her story with the world in the hopes that people could recognize some of the early warning signs before their life spirals into such a dark place, such a abused, controlled, um, brainwashed, and hurt place. So she, we started working on it my last year of college. I was home for a term because I'd gotten in trouble when I was actually kicked out of school for a term. Um, and I went to my nanny's house because she was like my rock. She hadn't been involved with our family professionally for years and years and years since I was 10, but she was always this person who I could go to her house and she would make me fried chicken and mashed potatoes with a butter river and like put it on the plate, set me in front of the TV, and I was just like safe. She would listen to me. She'd let me cry if I needed to. And that's the first place I went when I got kicked out of school because I was just lost. And I went to her as I felt home. And I think I just like cried my eyes out because I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And she just listened. And then at one point we were just watching TV and she said like, honey, some really bad things happened to me in the past, right? And I knew. So when I was 10, Kerry, my nanny, didn't show up to work. And we came to find out that she had been arrested on a fugitive warrant from a different state. So all the while she had been working for my family for 8 years, she had no driver's license, no bank account, no social security number. She was living under a fake name because we paid her in cash, and she was able to just she was a fugitive for 17 years. And I lived in St. Louis, but the state of Colorado came for her and took her back to prison, the prison that she had escaped from.
And that was when you were 10.
That was when I was 10.
And when did she start nannying for you?
I was 2.
Okay.
Because my parents could not handle me, and they had to bring in super nanny. And she got me into shape, and she ran our house like a ship, and she was my best friend and my playmate and my disciplinarian and my teacher and all these things, my second mother. And so when she didn't come back to work, it was pretty devastating because she was my rock. And I was 10 at the time, and I heard some terms: domestic violence, prison, check fraud, rape, abortion. And it was all very like, I had a very privileged upbringing, and none of those things touched my life. So they were all very, distant ideas, especially to a 10-year-old. And so when I'm sitting in Carrie's living room at 20 or 21, and she says, some bad things happened to me, I was just like, yeah, I kind of know. And she said, because when she got taken to prison, she eventually got released through the help of a lawyer who knew about her case and helped her out, this big shot lawyer. And when she came back to St. Louis, she had Dateline, the AP Wire, Oprah. Everyone was knocking down her door. They were like, we want your story. Come on our show. Just write something down. We'll make a movie. We'll get a huge deal. And she just wanted to live her life. She didn't even know who she was. But, this was 10 years later. And she said that she was finally ready to tell her story. Mm-hmm. She thought it was the only way she could find some silver lining in it, and also help, the people she would see people at the grocery store who she could tell. She could have a sixth sense for women who were abused, the way they carried themselves, the way they wore their sunglasses, the way their makeup was done. And she just didn't understand why it was still happening 10 years later when domestic violence is now a crime. cops are trained in how to deal with domestic violence situations. They don't just take the abuser to the bar and let him like get drunk and come back madder and say, oh, what'd you do to piss him off. They were cops had resources and there were shelters, and but at the same time domestic violence was worse than ever. So she realized that the best thing she could do is to share her story. And so I'm sitting in her living room and she says, do you know anyone who's working on a thesis or a creative writer who could potentially help me with this? I can't do it alone. And I was just like, I think we got to do it. It just kind of hit me that I had to write it with her. And for the next month I went to her house every day, and for 8 hours she just talked. And she started at her birth, even before her birth, and over the course of that month we got all the way to me sitting in that living room, and we had 100,000 words in a really shitty first draft.
Yeah.
And I spent the next 6 years learning how to write well enough to serve the story, and then massaging that story to a place where I felt like it was ready to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So she got arrested when you were 10. And so she never came back after that, and you kind of had to grow up from then on without her.
She came back, but she wasn't as big a part of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what now? All right. That process you said was 6 years of the writing of it. Now I'm curious to hear more about the post-release of once it was done. What happened from there? How did she respond to it? She's still around, I assume. Or?
She passed away in 2016. And we 2015. It's hard to remember the exact date, but 2015. We, when we were writing the book, it was really hard for her to relive all these memories, and she remembered everything with like striking detail. I was blown away by how she remembered conversations and the way the room smelled and the way, the guards changed in prison and the whole. Like, she remembered everything to a T. But it was so difficult for her because she had done some really bad things when she was under the thumb of this abuser, and she had written bad checks and stolen money, and all of it was to protect her and her children and keep this guy from hurting them. But she was so concerned that people were going to think poorly of her, that they would judge her. And I just kept reminding her of what her intention was, where if she could get to one woman and help one woman escape a bad situation before it got to the point where it was inescapable. Because the longer you stay in an abusive relationship, the harder it is to get out, to a point where it's impossible. And then tragedy happens. And I kept reminding her that if we got one person, it would all be worth it. And the book came out in March of 2014, and we sent copies all over the place, got great reviews. My friend at the Wall Street Journal wrote an amazing review, and it started to circle through the domestic violence networks, and it was successful, but we also gave it away for free online. We still do. So it was never a money-making project. And then a year to the day after it was released, Kerry was having some health issues, and she was in the hospital, and I was in LA, and she called me, and she was just so down. She was so beaten. Her body has just been through so much, and she was just tired. And I told her that day I had been texting with a woman who reached out because of the book as she left her abusive situation. So I was helping her find the shelter to go to. I was helping her as she packed up her kids' stuff and put it in the car. And it was so surreal to do that and know that this woman did what we hoped she would do, is read the book, saw the signs, and got out. And I told Kerry that, and she just she had this like childlike tone that came in her voice, and she lit up, and she was so happy. She was redeemed, and she was, fulfilled, and it all came full circle in a lot of ways that are hard to explain without reading the book and knowing how she had saved me at one point, and I was saving her by helping her tell her story. But she passed away 2 weeks later because I think she was just finished. I think she was done. She had a hard life, and it's kind of just this perfect ending, that she saw her redemption and then was able to sleep. So
So yeah, so you've been able to circulate the book around. And I know you still advocate
yeah,
all the time for.
yeah, I try to. I try to bring awareness to it. It's it's a tough issue, but
Because I believe when I was scouring the Instagram page and stuff, like it mentioned even it cured some internal family struggles too. Like I think I saw the son the son read the book.
oh yeah, all the sons have read the book.
Yeah, how can you tell me about that or
The sons?
yeah, just like what you've learned
Well,
from witnessing these kind of interactions and
so Kerry had 4 sons with her abuser, her husband, and a lot of the reasons was because if she was pregnant, she couldn't leave. If she had kids, there was more reasons not to leave. And when she went to prison and then escaped, the boys, all 4 boys, were with the dad, the abuser, and his mother, and in foster homes and bouncing around all these different places and being told that their mother just left them. So when they reconnected back in St. Louis years and years later, they were mad at her. They didn't know the truth, and they were resentful because of what they'd been told. And Carrie's whole goal in life was just to be a mother and to finally reconnect with her boys. It was everything, but it was so difficult. And there was healing, and there was they found enough of the truth to respect her and build a relationship with her, and she was able to have those relationships with her sons until she passed away. And the amazing thing about those boys, all 4 of them, is that they're good men, stable men with healthy relationships and like beautiful children, and they're not abusers. And that's when you have been modeled that throughout your childhood, that's how relationships work, that dad hits mom and that's how it goes. And it's just it's like the son of an alcoholic who never touches alcohol, whereas the brother, it becomes an alcoholic. But it's amazing that all 4 of those boys went the
yeah
the positive route.
yeah
So that's, I mean, I talk to Jermaine all the time. I talk to Michael, her son, all the time. When I go to St. Louis, I try to see them. So they're my brothers. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah because I guess like my whole perspective on is like how you introduce the subject is like I have no experience in that realm. So
In writing or
no,
in domestic violence.
I
Yeah.
mean towards the domestic violence
Yeah.
yeah, like my parents are great and have always been supportive of me and I've never witnessed anything like all that kind of stuff. So it's not in my world. So
Yeah.
I have been doing more reading lately, and I checked out like I've read the book and stuff. Well, I've read the intro chapters to the book
Yeah.
so far, but
It's like 3 pages.
and yeah, I'm curious. Okay, like something that I've been thinking a lot about during these quarantine times is I think on a lot of I feel like a lot of people have been going through different internal struggles and changes
Sure.
and witnessing the world around us and seeing these issues and wondering like what can we do, like what can I do as an individual to make a difference and make change and create something that helps push toward the positive. I feel like you've done a version of that with like telling the story and getting it out there. But I am curious on your thoughts as to how, or if you have thoughts on this, like how can individuals that aren't in that sphere do something
To help.
yeah, like what, if, yeah, as vague as that is.
Well, first of all, this quarantine time is a really tough time for domestic violence because people are
You're
stuck in homes in toxic relationships, the abuser may have lost their job, so they're stressed out. Their money is tight, and that just catalyzes the need for control, to take control, and then that control becomes abuse, and the abuse becomes violence, and it's a really tough time because people aren't able to get out and get the help they need, get the support they need. And I've tried to like share a lot of resources that are you know trying to provide the help that's usually there in terms of shelters and providing food and resources for women who are in tough situations, because when you got to go, you got to go, but you need somewhere to go, and it's a tough position. So I mean, I, yeah.
Yeah, because I guess like I think about, you talk about Carrie, and this is kind of like the intro of the book too. Is she has interaction with a woman in a parking lot,
Mm-hmm.
and she knows what's going on and she wants to help,
Yep.
but there's it's the same. It's the classic thing where somebody has to be asking for the help.
Right. You can't tell them.
So
Well, I'd say the best thing you can do is educate yourself about the cycle of abuse, how it works, how it starts, how it spirals bigger and bigger and deeper and deeper, and just try to educate yourself on the signs that there's abuse taking place in a relationship. They're subtle, but they're there, and you can pick up on them. And then the second thing you can do is just be open to like, that asking for help, and it might be in a way that's it's even more subtle. It might be just someone like being like, can we just go for like a margarita? Like, I don't know. It's just, you have to be aware of the signs and aware of when someone's asking for help, even if it's not a direct request. Yeah, I don't.
yeah, because
tricky.
the first thing you mentioned is being aware of the signs is more of like, if if I've, let's say for instance, if I read the book and I'm like, oh, that, I don't know, my thought is, if you know the signs, then you're less likely to get caught up in that spiraling. Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more the point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't excuse early signs or levels of abuse. You can't find a way to justify, or abusers are so smart. There's a book called Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft that goes through the different types of abusers. Like, there's Prince Charming, there's the terrorists, there's all kinds of different ways that they use their insidious tactics, but the main thing they do is find a way to make the abused person feel like they deserve it, and they start to believe it, and then they're stuck. So the key is, I mean, I wish every girl ages 13 to 15 could read stories about how domestic violence in relationships begins and how it progresses, because there are girls who think that like their teenage boyfriends and their high school boyfriends it's okay for them to hit them. That's they maybe it was modeled for them by their parents. Maybe it's just the environment they grew up in. Maybe it's what they saw on TV. But people still think it's normal, and it's not. It's not okay, and you have to put your foot down. And there's certain people in pop culture who have been caught being abusive, and they're just kind of like it's like kind of forgotten about, and it's like, oh no, his new album came out, so I just want to buy that album because I like his music.
Right.
And I think putting your foot down and refusing to support someone who is truly abusive is important, and then just trying to be healthy in your own relationships, trying to lead by example, which seems like a simple thing, like don't hit your partner, but don't, like, I don't know, people do it.
Right. Yeah, I guess that was going to be my next thought was the aggressor side.
Yeah.
On I don't know how deep you've gotten into researching why it happens in the first place, or if there's anything keep in mind on that side of things? On
There's a lot of psychology behind it, and you can be an abuser in your romantic relationship, in your work relationships, in your friendships. You can be abusive in a million different ways, and it doesn't all involve black eyes and bloody lips. But what I've figured out that the psychology comes down to is entitlement and control. The abuser thinks they are entitled to a position of power over this other person, whoever it may be, whatever the relationship may be. They're subordinate. And because they're entitled to that position of power, they're going to take control. And that manifests in so many different ways. There's financial abuse, making sure that your spouse doesn't have a credit card, has no bank account in their name, so they can't get away. They have no money. There's social abuse, making sure that they're, kept socially distant, which we're all doing right now, and controlling the perceptions of people in your social group. Abusers are really good at making their partners, parents, friends, neighbors, coworkers think that they're the crazy one, that they're the one who's insane. It's just like they're crazy gaslighting. So yeah, it's just, and it all manifests in different ways, and it's that entitlement that leads to control, that leads to abuse, and you got to nip that entitlement in the bud. You can't think that you're, for any reason, have a justification for controlling and abusing some other person. It's just, I don't know. It seems so simple, but it's maybe part of human nature. Maybe part of our animal lizard brain is to win. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, because the only thing when I think about myself and early relationships and stuff, I always think about how it takes a long time to really be comfortable with yourself and be confident in yourself and figure out who you are and how to stand up like that.
How to be in a relationship.
Yeah, how to be in a relationship, even how to be an individual and stand up for who you are. That takes time. So it's a tough experiences the.
Yeah, I didn't have a real relationship until I was 24 because I never felt like I was self-actualized, or I never felt like I was ready, complete. You got to be a 1 before you can be a 2. And I never felt like a 1. I never felt like, I don't know, I just wasn't ready to be vulnerable and open, and I don't know, it's just.
Yeah, it's a very mature.
Maybe.
Well, it takes a lot to go to the outside to observe yourself in that way and be like, I'm not ready for that, and holding out, because most people kind of rush into it thinking that's going to fix them or however it may come about. But
and I definitely was flawed in my first relationship, which I thought that I would just get into a relationship and it'd be one and done. I'd get married and that'd be it. I had this romantic idea that I'd just find the one, but you realize that relationships take practice. You get better at them as they evolve. And yeah, if you marry your high school sweetheart and you guys have a healthy relationship from age 16 on, awesome. Chances are not going to work out for everyone. And you got to go through those growing pains of, you hurt each other and you get hurt and you make mistakes and you learn what feels good and what feels bad. And it's, it kind of sucks that you have to go through that, but you do. You have to learn how to be in a healthy relationship. You have to learn how to be selfless and truly caring and truly loving and giving and honest and communicative and emotionally available. There's a ton of things you have to learn to be in a good relationship. I'm still working on it. I'm not perfect.
No, that's life.
Yeah. But could be doing better. I don't know.
No, for sure. That's the struggle of every aspect of life, is constant improving and all that stuff.
Yeah, but you do need to be proud of how far you've come, and to some extent happy with where you are, because that's where you are. So yeah, I think I've come a long way in my relationships. That's for sure.
So now, all right, so the book came out in 2014. We're in 2020. It's been 6 years.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious to jump from the heavier topic stuff of
Yeah.
what's in of the messages of the book and jump back into that writing process. You said you massaged for so long.
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious as to how you decided to tell it in the way that you did, because uh, like I've read some of the reviews, and it grabs people quickly, and it's very well written, and there's like time jumping around, so you start in later years and jump back. So I'm curious if you have any insight onto how you told the story.
No, it took a long time to figure out the best way to tell the story, and a couple of our intentions were, one, we needed to tell the story in a way that was compelling and almost urgent. That our goal was to have people read it in one sitting. We wanted to write it, 100,000 words is 400 pages, so we whittled that down to 217 pages, because we wanted people to have the chance to get through it in one sitting, because there was a fear that if you put a book that's that heavy down, you're not going to want to go back to it. So that's why the first couple chapters are short, and then just keep going, and then she's got so much in her life that like it just keeps coming, and you sort of don't have a chance to stop. There's no respite until the happy ending. So that was one goal, and then another goal was writing in a way that was not simple but accessible. We wanted a 13-year-old girl to be able to read it and process it and digest it, and that was important to us. So I read like the Hunger Games, and I read a bunch of young adult stuff just to figure out the level of the writing. And
what are you working from the whole time? Did you? I'm assuming. Like, did you record the conversations, or like how did you? What did that process?
In that first month when we were just getting the story down, I would go to her house. She would talk. I would take notes furiously on my laptop, and I'd go home at night and put it into some sort of narrative, put in sentences and paragraphs and chronology, and then that was what became that 100,000 words, and that just got chopped up, moved around, edited down until it was like a lean, driving narrative, and that was what the process of 6 years was. It was just killing all your darlings, getting rid of the fluff, figuring out what the spine of the story is, only adding words that drive towards that spine, and then the other part of it was I had to be a channel for Kerry's voice. I couldn't, I have my own style of writing when I write little essays and whatnot, but it wasn't my tone. It was really important to capture the way she spoke and the way her words came out and were authentic. Especially, I had to write about getting raped, having an abortion, having babies, being beaten mercilessly by a spouse, and those are all things that I had never, and in some cases could never experience. So I had to it was this very vulnerable practice of just like almost blacking out and just letting her words come through my fingers somehow, and I think it worked. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's parts where I had to write about myself as a third person. I had to write about her perception of me as a little boy. And those were really tough because there was some pain behind that little boy. And that was another situation where I just kind of had to black out and trust.
Yeah, because that's... because you wrote it in first person, so it was her perspective the entire time.
It's Kerry's perspective, yeah.
That's very interesting. Like I said, like making the feature, it was on the inside. It was a 20-month process for me. Yeah. This, for you, it's ongoing in ways.
Yeah. That's the outline of a potential screenplay. I'm talking about doing it as an audiobook or a podcast, and always trying to push it further. I always feel like I'd be doing more with it. Yeah.
So that makes it 10 years? Was it 2010? Because I'm trying to do the math.
2010 that we started working on it? 2009-ish. So it's been 11 years.
Yeah.
And it's difficult because if you read the book and you see there's a part towards the end where Kerry saves me in a way, and that is reflected in the way I was able to help her tell her story. And the book feels like this perfect circle of vulnerability and redemption and connection. And no, I don't think anyone could have written that book with her besides me. It was meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I was home, that she saw that woman at the grocery store that day, it's just, I think it's the most perfect creative thing I'll ever do. I don't think I can beat it. And I've always wanted to turn it into a screenplay because I think that's one way to draw more attention to the issue, you know. And there's never been a domestic violence movie that's really gotten it right or been as impactful as it could be. I think there's like enough with Jennifer Lopez and like some other things, but it's never really gotten to the heart of the issue. And you know, part of me feels like every day that movie's not out there is a day that I'm failing, but also it's like we wrote the book. That was the I don't know.
Yeah, the story's out there, and
Yeah.
it's and people are hearing it.
Yeah.
But I can see the need for wanting to get it out there even more so.
Yeah.
Because that's been the I just started reading again recently, like November. I started reading,
Like just reading anything.
just reading in general. Like I wasn't reading.
I didn't read a
anything.
word for months.
I didn't read. Like
Yeah. You don't have time to read. You're always making films.
So I, for whatever reason, I committed to half an hour a day to read something.
It's good.
So I've had a chance to read a couple of memoirs and whatnot, and
Yeah.
and of course there's all those studies that say that reading, like people who read are just more empathetic and are like smarter.
Yeah, because
like,
you are forced to see things through someone else's worldview, and
yeah.
Yeah.
So my gut reaction is that the book is actually probably the most visceral experience you'll have, but people don't read.
people don't read.
So it's good to have other forms
They
of
see
it.
movies.
It's good. It's good to have other forms of the message, just so you can hit as many
Yeah.
markets or demographics or whatever the case may be. But
And that's the other thing is like we put the book out under our own publishing imprint because we wanted to have full control over it. We were scared of what a publisher or an agent or an editor would do to the story to make it more dramatic. Because
right.
when you're dealing with the psychology of abuse, you can't get it wrong because then you're teaching people the wrong things. So we did our best to get her story right, and we knew we did that. So we were very cautious with bringing anyone else on board, and we put the book. We wanted to give it away for free. We wanted to maintain control over the story, and then the idea of bringing it to Hollywood. Not that like I have producers knocking down my door, but it scares me what you see what happens to memoirs that become biopics, and you see what happens to movies that get books that get adapted. It's never quite the same.
Yeah.
And that scares me. So if I was to work with anyone on it, I'd have to be absolutely sure that they were on the same page. And I haven't found that yet, so
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.